March 15, 1952. Midtown Manhattan. A white car dealer named Richard Coleman made the biggest mistake of his life. He looked Bumpy Johnson straight in the eye and said two words that would cost him everything: "We're closed." Bumpy had cash in his pocket. $53,000. Enough to buy 3 brand new Cadillacs. But Coleman didn't care about the money. He cared about the color of Bumpy's skin. What happened in the next 12 hours became the most talked about story in Harlem for the next decade. 240 people were inside Coleman's luxury motors that Tuesday afternoon. The biggest car dealership in Manhattan. Chrome bumpers gleaming under fluorescent lights. Red Cadillacs. Black Lincolns. White Chryslers lined up like soldiers. Bumpy Johnson walked through those glass doors at exactly 2:47 p.m. He wore a gray suit tailored on Lenox Avenue. Italian leather shoes that cost more than most men made in a month. His bodyguard Big Sam followed 3 steps behind. They walked straight to the most expensive car on the floor. A midnight blue Cadillac Eldorado. Price tag, $17,500. Bumpy ran his hand across the hood. Smooth as silk. He turned to the nearest salesman and said 5 words. "I want to buy this." The salesman froze. His face went pale. He looked at Bumpy, then at the car, then back at Bumpy. "I'll get the manager," he whispered. Richard Coleman appeared 2 minutes later. Tall man. Slick back hair. Expensive watch. The kind of man who thought his money made him better than everyone else. He walked up to Bumpy with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Can I help you?" Coleman asked. His voice dripped with something ugly. Bumpy pointed at the Cadillac. "I'm buying this car. Cash." He patted his jacket pocket. The outline of thick bills visible through the fabric. Coleman's smile disappeared. He looked around the showroom. At the white customers browsing. At his white salesman watching. At the reputation he'd built selling cars to Manhattan's elite. He made his choice. "We're closed," Coleman said. Bumpy tilted his head. "Your sign says you're open until 6. Coleman stepped closer. Close enough that Bumpy could smell his cologne. "We're close to you." The showroom went silent. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. 240 people watched what happened next. Big Sam's hand moved toward his waistband. Bumpy raised one finger. Sam froze. Bumpy looked at Coleman for 10 seconds. Didn't blink. Didn't speak. Just looked. Then he smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile a shark gives right before it strikes. "Okay," Bumpy said softly. "We'll be back." He turned and walked out. The glass doors closed behind him. Coleman laughed. He actually laughed. Told his salesman Bumpy Johnson had just tucked tail and run. Told them he'd put that Harlem gangster in his place. Told them nobody was going to force him to sell cars to people he didn't want to sell to. Coleman had no idea what he'd just started. If you want the full truth about what Bumpy did next, hit like so this story reaches more people who need to hear it. 3 weeks earlier, something happened that would explain everything. The Italian mob had tried to move into Harlem. 5 families wanted Bumpy's territory. They offered him money to step aside. $50,000 to just walk away. Bumpy said no. They threatened his businesses. He didn't flinch. They sent men with guns. Those men never came back. The Italians learned what everyone in Harlem already knew. Bumpy Johnson didn't run from anyone. He didn't back down. He didn't forget. And he definitely didn't forgive. So when Coleman told him, "We're closed," Bumpy saw something bigger than a car dealer being racist. He saw a man who thought he was untouchable. A man who needed to learn a lesson. A man who was about to find out why 40,000 people in Harlem called Bumpy the Professor. Bumpy left Coleman's dealership at 3:02 p.m. By 3:30 p.m., he was in his office above a restaurant on Lenox Avenue. He made 4 phone calls. The first call went to Marcus Brown. Marcus owned every taxi company in Harlem. 1,700 drivers worked for him. Bumpy said 8 words: "No more pickups in Midtown Manhattan. Starting now." Marcus didn't ask why. He just said yes. The second call went to Joseph Williams. Joseph ran the numbers racket across 5 boroughs. 2,000 men collected bets for him every day. Bumpy said 12 words: Tell every runner to stop doing business with anyone from Coleman's dealership. Joseph wrote it down. The third call went to Sarah Mitchell. Sarah controlled every cleaning service from Harlem to the Bronx. 300 women worked for her. Bumpy said 15 words. Anyone who works at Coleman's Luxury Motors needs to find a new job by tomorrow morning. Sarah understood. The fourth call went to Thomas Reed. Thomas was the head of the Longshoremen's Union. 5,000 dock workers followed his orders. Bumpy said 10 words. No deliveries to Coleman's address. Not today. Not ever. Thomas smiled. Consider it done. Comment justice if you believe Coleman was about to learn a hard lesson. For hours after Bumpy walked out of that dealership, things started to change. Coleman stayed late that night. He always did on Tuesdays. Counted the money from the day's sales. Went over next week's deliveries. Planned his newspaper ads. At 7:15 p.m., his phone rang. It was his parts supplier. Mr. Coleman, we've got a problem. The truck bringing your engines from Jersey won't unload. Coleman frowned. Why not? Union trouble. They're saying something about a work dispute. Coleman hung up. Called the union directly. Nobody answered. He tried 3 more suppliers. Same story. Trucks sitting outside his dealership. Drivers refusing to unload. $800,000 worth of parts sitting in trucks going nowhere. Coleman started to sweat. He called his lawyer. His accountant. His friends in the city. Nobody could help him. Nobody could explain what was happening. But Coleman wasn't stupid. He knew who was behind it. He just didn't know how far it would go. The next morning, Wednesday, March 16th, Coleman arrived at his dealership at 6 a.m. The cleaning crew hadn't shown up. The building was dirty from the day before. Coffee cups on desks. Cigarette butts in ashtrays. Streaks on the windows. He called the cleaning company. A woman's voice answered. We don't service that address anymore. Coleman stared at the phone. His secretary called in sick. Then his receptionist. Then 3 of his salesmen. All on the same day. All with the same excuse. Family emergency. Coleman knew better. He tried to open for business anyway. Set up the showroom himself. Turned on the lights. Unlocked the doors. At 8:30 a.m., his first customer of the day walked in. A rich banker from Park Avenue. Ready to buy a Lincoln. They shook hands. Started talking price. Then the banker's phone rang. He stepped outside to answer it. Came back 2 minutes later with a strange look on his face. I just remembered I have another appointment, the banker said. He walked out. Never came back. This happened 6 more times that day. Customers would come in. Get interested in a car. Then suddenly remember they had somewhere else to be. Coleman didn't understand. He had no idea that word had spread through every social club, every restaurant, every barbershop in the city. The message was simple. Anyone who bought a car from Coleman's Luxury Motors would have trouble in Harlem. And in 1952, every business in Manhattan needed Harlem. The restaurants needed the black waiters and cooks. The hotels needed the black maids and porters. The taxi companies needed Harlem streets. You couldn't operate in New York City if Harlem turned its back on you. Coleman was learning this lesson the hard way. Type yes if you're starting to see how Bumpy operated differently than other men. By Thursday morning, Coleman was desperate. No deliveries for 2 days. No cleaning crew. Half his staff gone. Sales down to 0. He'd lost $43,000 in 48 hours. His dealership was dying. And he knew exactly who to blame. At 10 a.m., he called a friend who knew people in Harlem. I need to talk to Bumpy Johnson, Coleman said. His voice shook. I need to make this right. The friend laughed. Not a happy laugh. A sad laugh. The kind of laugh you give someone who just realized they made a terrible mistake. Richard, the friend said slowly, you should have thought about that before you closed your doors on him. The friend hung up. Coleman sat at his desk. Head in his hands. He'd built this dealership from nothing. 15 years of work. The biggest car showroom in Manhattan. And it was crumbling in 3 days because he'd been too proud to sell a car to a black man. Friday afternoon. 12 hours had passed since Coleman called that friend. Now we reached the moment that changed everything. Coleman locked up his empty dealership at 3 p.m. Only 2 customers all day. 0 sales. He walked to his car in the backlot. And there, leaning against a lamppost, was Bumpy Johnson. Same gray suit. Same Italian leather shoes. Same calm expression. Big Sam stood beside him. Coleman's heart dropped into his stomach. His hands started shaking. His mouth went dry. Bumpy pushed off the lamppost and walked toward him. Slow. Like he had all the time in the world. He stopped 3 feet away. "Heard you've been having some trouble," Bumpy said quietly. Coleman couldn't speak. His throat was tight. His palms were sweating. Bumpy tilted his head. "Seems like the city doesn't want to work with you anymore. Funny how that happens." "Mr. Johnson," Coleman finally managed to say. "Please. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I'm sorry." Bumpy didn't respond. He just watched Coleman squirm. Let the silence stretch. Let the fear build. Coleman kept talking. "The Cadillac. The blue one. It's yours. Free. No charge. Just please, make this stop." Bumpy smiled that shark smile again. "I don't want it for free," he said. "I wanted to buy it. I had cash. You remember?" Coleman nodded frantically. "Yes. Of course. I'll sell it to you. Please." Bumpy reached into his jacket. Pulled out an envelope. Thick with bills. $17,500, Bumpy said. "Same price you had on the tag." He held out the envelope. Coleman took it with trembling hands. "Share this video so people understand how real power works in the streets." Bumpy wasn't finished. He stepped closer. Close enough that Coleman could see every detail of his face. Every line. Every scar. "You know what you did wrong?" Bumpy asked. His voice was so soft Coleman had to lean in to hear it. "You thought you were better than me because of the color of my skin. You thought you could disrespect me in front of 200 people. You thought there would be no consequences." Coleman tried to respond, but Bumpy kept talking. "I don't care that you're racist. Half this city is racist. But you embarrassed me. You tried to make me small. That's your real mistake." Bumpy took a step back. "Your business is finished, Coleman. Not because I'm keeping pressure on. Because word spreads. People talk. They'll remember what you did. They'll remember what happened when you did it. And nobody, not one person in this city, will want to risk what you risked." Coleman's legs felt weak. "What do I do?" he whispered. Bumpy shrugged. "That's your problem to solve. But I'll tell you this. You've got 2 choices. You can close this dealership and start over somewhere else. Or you can stay here and watch it die slowly. Either way, you learned something today." Bumpy turned to leave. Then stopped. Looked back over his shoulder. "And Coleman? Next time someone walks into your business with cash in their pocket, you take the money. You don't look at their face and decide they're not good enough. Because you never know who you're really talking to." Big Sam opened the car door. Bumpy slid into the driver's seat of that midnight blue Cadillac. The one he'd wanted to buy 3 days ago. The one that had cost Coleman everything. The engine roared to life. Bumpy drove away slowly. Left Coleman standing in that parking lot. Alone. Broken. Destroyed. If this shocked you, comment respect below. The news spread through Manhattan like wildfire. By Saturday morning, everyone knew the story. The car dealer who refused to sell to Bumpy Johnson. The empire that fell in 3 days. The lesson that would be remembered for years. Coleman tried to keep his dealership open. He really did. Hired new staff. Placed bigger ads in newspapers. Offered discounts nobody else would match. But the damage was done. The reputation was destroyed. Every potential customer had heard what happened. Every supplier remembered the phone calls they received. Every worker in the city knew which side of history Coleman stood on. Within 2 months, he'd lost 60% of his business. Sales dropped from 40 cars a week to 6. Then to 3. Then to 1. His best salesmen left for competitors. His mechanics found jobs across town. His receptionist took a position at a hotel in Queens. Everyone wanted distance from the sinking ship. Everyone saw the writing on the wall. Within 6 months, Coleman was bankrupt. The bank called in his loans. His investors pulled their money. His partners cut ties and walked away. The man who'd been worth $300,000 was now worth nothing. Less than nothing. He owed money to everyone. Within a year, Coleman's luxury motors was gone. Finished. The building was sold at auction for a fraction of what Coleman paid for it. Turned into a furniture store first. That failed in 8 months. Then a restaurant. That lasted 2 years. Then apartments. The apartments are still there today. Nice place. Good neighborhood. But people still remember what happened there. Still tell the story of the day a man thought he was too good to sell a car to Bumpy Johnson. And what Bumpy did when that man said no. Parents tell their children. Teachers tell their students. Business owners tell their employees. The story never dies. It just grows. Gets bigger. Becomes legend. See, Bumpy understood something that Coleman never did. Power isn't about guns. It isn't about violence. It isn't about making people fear you through threats or intimidation. Real power is about connections. About respect. About building a network so strong that you don't need to threaten anyone. You just make a phone call. For phone calls actually. And the whole city moves the way you want it to move. That's what 15 years in Harlem had taught Bumpy. That's what watching empires rise and fall had shown him. Violence is temporary. Fear fades. But loyalty built on respect lasts forever. Bumpy didn't touch Coleman. Didn't send men to his house in the middle of the night. Didn't break his windows or burn his cars or threaten his family. He didn't need to. He just removed the foundation that Coleman's business sat on. The workers. The suppliers. The customers. The network that keeps any business alive. And without that foundation, everything collapsed. Like a house built on sand. One wave and it's gone. That's the difference between a gangster and a businessman. A gangster uses force because force is all he has. A businessman uses leverage because leverage multiplies power. Bumpy Johnson was both. He understood the streets and the boardrooms. The violence when necessary and the strategy always. That's what made him different. That's what made him legendary. The Cadillac? Bumpy drove it for 6 years. Kept it pristine. Polished. Perfect. Waxed every Sunday morning. Chrome shining like mirrors. Paint reflecting the Harlem sun. That car became as famous as Bumpy himself. Maybe more famous. Every time he parked on Lenox Avenue, people would gather around it. Touch the hood gently. Peer through the windows. Ask to hear the story again. The story of how Bumpy Johnson bought a car from a man who said he'd never sell to him. The story of how pride cost a man everything he'd built. The story of why you never, ever disrespect someone just because you think you can get away with it. Bumpy would lean against that blue Cadillac and smile. That same shark smile he'd given Coleman. Cost me $17,500, he'd say. But it cost Coleman $1 million. People would laugh. Shake their heads. Marvel at the mathematics of revenge. Then Bumpy would get in and drive away. Engine purring. Radio playing. Leaving people to wonder what other stories that car could tell. What other battles it had witnessed. What other men had learned hard lessons because they underestimated the man behind the wheel. March 15, 1952. Richard Coleman made 2 choices that day. The first choice was to refuse service to Bumpy Johnson. The second choice was thinking he'd get away with it. Both choices were wrong. Both choices destroyed him. And both choices taught everyone watching a lesson they'd never forget. In Harlem, respect isn't given. It's earned. And once earned, it's protected. Bumpy Johnson spent his life earning that respect. Coleman spent 12 hours learning why you should never test a man who has an entire neighborhood behind him. Because you can't win a war when 40,000 soldiers fight for the other side. You can't break a man when every business in the city answers his phone calls. You can't survive when you make an enemy of someone who built an empire on loyalty and respect. The blue Cadillac still exists. Restored. In a private collection somewhere in New Jersey. People pay money to see it. Take pictures next to it. Touch the hood that Bumpy touched. Sit in the driver's seat where Bumpy sat. They want to feel connected to the legend. To the story. To the moment when one man's racism met another man's power and lost. Badly. Completely. Permanently. That car isn't just a car anymore. It's a symbol. A reminder. A warning. It says, be careful who you underestimate. Be careful whose money you refuse. Be careful what you do when you think nobody's watching. Because in New York City, someone is always watching. And if that someone is Bumpy Johnson, you'd better hope you treated them right. If you learned something today, hit that like button. Comment what surprised you most about how Bumpy handled this situation. And subscribe because there are dozens more stories like this one. Stories about real people who changed history without firing a single shot. Stories about power, respect, and what happens when the wrong person crosses the wrong man at the wrong time. This is how legends are built. One story at a time. One lesson at a time. One blue Cadillac at a time.